Adam Sandler's character in the final game, he's noted for being a point shaver and gambling and all that kind of stuff. So the judge basically, to like let him out of prison, says you got to throw this game against the guards in the back. So he throws like 4 picks in like 4 straight drives. The backup quarterback then comes in because he just takes himself out of the game. And this guy's just a complete spaz. And he's just like, it's Brucey's time to shine. Brucey's time to shine. And that's how I think of Marcus Smart, where he gets the ball in these moments. He's just like, it's Marcus's time to shine. I got to do something here and try to close this out. Eventually he did with the free throws, but just jacking up 3-pointers all over the place, the full Marcus Smart experience. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into Monkey Knife Fights NBA Finals Preview. I'm Dan Watkins. Joining me, the great Nick Whalen from Rotowire.com. Nick, what's up, buddy? How we been?
Been good. Coming off a long weekend. Nice to relax, kind of reset a little bit, get a few days off finally after going every other day with these conference finals. Very, very excited to get the finals underway tomorrow night.
Yeah, relax, time off. That's how you could describe the last week for the Golden State Warriors. I feel like we haven't watched them in like a month. It's been, even that Mavericks series was just, the only thing I really remember from that series is like the leak in Dallas in Game 4, right, when they had to clean up the floor. Like, give us what was your takeaway from that Dallas series?
You know, it's really hard to say how we judge the Warriors, and I think we're finally going to get that answer with how they fare against Boston in the finals, because on paper it seems like Boston had the much tougher path, right? You go 7 games against Milwaukee, you go 7 games against Miami. You face a Brooklyn team that in round 1 everybody thought that would be a 7-game series, and of course Boston pulls off the sweep. So, you know, it feels like Boston's had this hard road, whereas Golden State, you know, at any point in round 1, 2, or 3, were they ever really threatened? Like maybe a little bit against Memphis, you know, when you're down 55 in a game that you have a chance to close out the series. That was a little bit concerning, but of course, Golden State came back and slammed the door in the next Game 6. So really at no point have they faced any adversity. At no point did you ever really think, oh, they might not win this series. Which, you know, that's a good thing, right? If you can make it through the playoffs unscathed and untested, more power to you. Very few teams can say that, but you know, they're going to be pushed at some point in this series against Boston. I think that's a given. So, you know, again, it's good sometimes when you're on cruise control if you're playing that well, but they're going to get punched in the mouth probably for the first time in these entire playoffs at some point in the finals, and that's where we're going to see, you know, how does this team really stack up versus those great Warriors teams of the last decade.
Yeah, I think the biggest question mark for Golden State, or like the most adversity they've faced, is Steph Curry healthy all the way back in the first round when he was coming off that injury? I think that was the biggest like question for them.
Yeah, and they had the luxury of bringing him off the bench like way longer than they needed to. I mean, it almost felt like they were just messing around. I think they knew they were going to beat Denver. Jordan Poole was great in that series. And Steph Curry's played really well. He's played probably better in these playoffs than he has since the first month of the regular season. You know, he went through a pretty prolonged slump by Steph Curry standards for the final 2/3 of the regular season. And he's looked great. Maybe getting a little bit of time off at the end of the year kind of refreshed him a little bit. But the Warriors have gotten, you know, they've gotten standout performances from Jordan Poole in the first round, Andrew Wiggins in rounds 2 and 3, Kevon Looney in rounds 2 and 3. They're getting Otto Porter back from injury, you know, to begin the finals. Andre Iguodala is going to be back for either Game 1 or Game 2, it sounds like. So, you know, things are trending up, certainly for Golden State. And you could say the same thing about Boston, right? I mean, the one knock I would say on the Celtics is, you know, yes, this is their first time, you know, with this group getting to the finals, getting over that hump. But, man, you know, not having Chris Middleton in that Milwaukee series and letting the Bucks take them to 7, that was a little bit of a scare. And then kind of doing the same thing against a Miami team that technically had all of its pieces, but, you know, Jimmy Butler was absent for seemingly half of that series. Kyle Lowry was really, really bad and clearly not himself. Tyler Hero, you know, missed time in that series. And, you know, that one came down to the final, 15 seconds essentially in a Game 7. So on one hand, props to Boston for getting this far, for finally getting over the hump. But on the other hand, you know, you kind of worry about this team's ability to close out games, because the leeway that they had against a Milwaukee team with no Middleton and a Miami team that it felt like everybody 1 through 12 was dealing with some sort of nagging injury, you're not going to get that kind of leeway against Golden State.
No, you're not. And that's my one big concern with the Celtics here, is their ability to close out these games at the end of series. And my other worry with the Celtics is Did they make a mistake by not finishing that series off in 6 games and getting that extra 2 days of rest? Because I think Rob Williams, of all people, absolutely needed an extra day or two, because he did not look good to me Sunday night, Nick. He was hobbling up and down that court. I mean, what he finished with, like 18 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah, the Robert Williams piece is going to be really interesting. If he's not himself for this series, maybe that's what ultimately swings it in favor of Golden State. But at the same time, there were times in the Milwaukee series where I thought Rob Williams looked terrible, and then he would play the next game and he was the best defensive player on the floor for Boston. So it kind of just seems to be like a day-to-day thing for him. I don't know that knee is ever going to be 100%, during this final series. That's probably something that's going to need extensive rest throughout the offseason. But if he can just play really well for even 3 out of 6 or 3 out of 7 games, maybe that's enough for the Boston Celtics. But at the end of the day, like the fact that this series starts on Thursday, it's a rest advantage certainly for Golden State, but Boston last played on Sunday night. So you have Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday as days off. I don't see the rest thing being a huge storyline coming into this series.
Yeah, I'm wondering if game one is going to kind of shake out like game one of the Eastern Conference Finals, where the Celts looked great in the first half of that game, and then they kind of just like let the rope slip away in the second half. Wonder if we're going to see that. But before we get to our NBA Finals preview, I want to kind of backtrack and go to the Eastern Conference Finals and go to Game 7, Nick, and what was possibly like what felt like the longest 3 minutes in sports history, from when Marcus Smart hit his free throws with 3.5 minutes to go to put the Celts up 13, to then with 30 seconds left, the Celts are only up by 2, and Marcus Smart is back at the line. What was your big takeaway from how the Celtics ended that game?
It was kind of the same type of stretches that we've seen from Boston several times in these playoffs, and they got away with it. I think if Jimmy Butler hits that pull-up three with
what, you have a problem with that shot?
What's that?
You have a problem with that shot he took?
Not necessarily, no. I think you'd maybe prefer to work it for something a little better, especially when you're considering who the player is. Like if it's Jason Tatum taking that shot, I think it's a great shot. But it's Jimmy Butler who has gone out of his way most of the season and last season to just not shoot threes. He's a guy who just doesn't really have that in his arsenal anymore. Unless it seems to come and go. Like there's certain games where he'll just feel it, and all of a sudden he'll go 4 or 6 from 3, and then he'll take 3 combined 3-pointers over the next 8 games. So for him in particular, I didn't love the shot, but I think the way people are talking are like he passed up a wide open layup or a guaranteed and one. It's Al Horford standing back there. Like that's a very good, very long, stout defender. Jimmy Butler is one of the strongest wings in the league. He's one of the best finishers through contact in the league. So yes, there's a decent chance that you can go at Al Horford one-on-one and maybe get the foul, but Jimmy Butler's a good, not great free throw shooter. I didn't really have a big time problem with it. I do have a problem with how people are talking about it though. Like it's not, there were still, even if he made that shot, that would have put Miami up 1 with about 12 seconds left. Still a lot of basketball to be played. So I think to say that the entire game or the entire series swung on that one pull-up 3 by Jimmy Butler, who's like the only guy for Miami who consistently showed up when healthy in this series, I don't love that that's kind of become the dominant narrative on the Miami side.
Yeah, especially because Miami shouldn't have even been in the game at that point.
Right.
Up 13 with 3.5 minutes to go. Marcus Smart, who took 10 3-point shots in that game, by the way, just way too many. A lot of people around here in Boston are making the big deal that he took 22 shots total. But if Marcus Smart's driving and hitting layups, so what if his shot counts that high? It's more than 10 3-pointers, specifically in that 3-minute stretch where the lead dwindled. He went 0 for 3. He was just jacking up 3-pointers. And a little obscure reference here, like the only thing that came to mind to me with that is I'm sure you've seen the classic film, The Longest Yard with Adam Sandler and co, correct?
Yeah, I'm not a movie guy. I'm not a movie guy. I can't say that I have. I know of it though. I know the general plot.
All right. Well, anyways, check that one out when you have a chance. But Adam Sandler's character in the final game, he's noted for being a point shaver and gambling and all that kind of stuff. So the judge basically, to like let him out of prison, says you got to throw this game against the guards and the back. So he throws like 4 picks in like 4 straight drives. The backup quarterback then comes in because he just takes himself out of the game. And this guy's just a complete spaz. And he's just like, it's Brucey's time to shine. Brucey's time to shine. And that's how I think of Marcus Smart, where he gets the ball in these moments. He's just like, it's Marcus's time to shine. I got to do something here and try to close this out. Eventually he did with the free throws, but just jacking up 3-pointers all over the place, the full Marcus Smart experience.
Yeah, Marcus Smart leading the Celtics in field goal attempts and 3-point attempts, and being their second leading scorer in a closeout Game 7 on the road. It couldn't have happened any other way, right? I mean, the Celtics for for as much as the metrics love them and for how great they've been, consistently on both ends since kind of midway through the season, they still have a way to kind of make every game seem like a heart attack finish, right? And I don't really know who's going to win this series. I'm leaning Golden State, and part of the reason for that is it just seems like these mistakes have not come back to haunt Boston in the way that they should have the last couple rounds. And again, against Golden State, you're just not going to have this kind of wiggle room. You can't have stretches where Marcus Smart is just jacking up and missing threes 5 possessions in a row late in the game, because Golden State's the type of team that's going to take advantage of that, in the ways that Miami and Milwaukee ultimately could.
All right. Last thought here from the Eastern Conference Finals, the overturn of the Max Strus 3-pointer. Have you ever seen anything like that before, where it was like several minutes after the shot?
No, I mean, we see it all the time where, they'll go to commercial, or they'll wait till a break and play, or even sometimes at the end of a quarter, and, it'll be like 32-32, and then it'll start and it's like, wait, now it's 31-32. And they'll do a review there. But that one was just, it was so much later than normal. It was just, you kind of forgot about it. There was enough time had elapsed. But yeah, I mean, that was just one of several kind of crazy things that happened in the second half of that game. And, I thought Eric Spoelstra did well to bite his tongue when asked about that. I think he said it would be, quote, like a teaching moment or something like that, which should be enough to probably avoid a fine, I would think.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure they got the call right. No. At the end of the day, that angle did not look clear that he had stepped out of bounds. No. So moving on, let's get to this finals matchup between the Celtics and the Warriors. As you know, I'm sure all of you out there know and remember well, it's a rematch of the 1964 NBA Finals, where the Celtics won 4-1 in 5 games. They won their 6th straight title back then, which is the record for most consecutive titles in all of sports. I think they went on to win 8 straight during that time. But MKF, if you go to our Twitter page at MKF, we threw up a couple lines there of what that series would have been like, just for fun, while we wait yet another day for this finals matchup to start. Wilt Chamberlain, Nick, his more or less for points would have been 42.5. for the more or less for Wilt. And then Bill Russell, his rebound total would have been 25.5. So just some gaudy and absurd numbers that day.
Yeah, so I'm kind of a Bill Russell hater. Bill Russell went off for 11 points on 38% shooting in that series. Again, a 5-game series win for Boston with 38% shooting for old Bill Russell. Meanwhile, Wilt Chamberlain averaged 29 and 28 for the series. 29 points, 28 rebounds per game. So I guess, by those numbers, we maybe got to go less on the points and probably more on whatever his rebounding prop would be.
Yeah, it's just some of those battles between Wilt and Bill came down to the Celtics just had a much superior team around him that he didn't need to score constantly against Wilt. With Tommy Heinsohn and Casey and Sam Jones, Bob Cousy, of course, all those great guys back in the day.
Right. Right. Well, and everybody, nobody ever talks about this, but, Gary Phillips just didn't show up for the Warriors in that series. I mean, Gary Phillips averaging 10 points a game on 33% shooting. They got almost nothing out of Kenny Sears. Al Addles, didn't have a great series either. All that really just goes, kind of undercovered.
Yeah, absolutely. So flash forward now, we go to 2022, and here we are, Celtics-Warriors. This series, I think, is going to be very interesting because did you know that the Celtics, since Steve Kerr took over as head coach in 2015, so 8 years, the Warriors have made 6 trips to the finals. Only one team in the NBA has a winning record against Steve Kerr, and that's the Boston Celtics. And that's even going back to when it was like Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder. Those years, the Celtics were playing this Warriors team tough. Now the Celtics have 2 superstars, possibly the best player in this series in Jason Tatum, depending on who you're asking. But how do you like this matchup, Nick, from just like a visual standpoint? Are we going to get a barrage of 3-pointers? What kind of basketball are we going to watch?
Well, the number one thing, when I think of Boston trying to defend Golden State, and to answer your question, like, are we going to get that barrage of 3-pointers? I'm going to be very interested to see if Boston can continue, running the Warriors off the line in the way that they were able to defend both Miami and Milwaukee really effectively from beyond the arc. Milwaukee had a couple of games where they launched a ton of attempts, but what was it in game 7 of that series? They were like 4 of 31 or something from 3. And a lot of those were contested, where it felt like watching that game, it's like Milwaukee is working so hard just to generate an open corner 3. And a lot of times it's someone that you don't necessarily want shooting it. And then on the other end, it's just wide open 3 after wide open 3 for Al Horford, Jason Tatum, Grant Williams on the Boston side. So, one, I don't think those looks are necessarily going to be there for Boston against this Golden State defensive scheme, but I think it's going to be a lot more interesting to see if Boston can continue to do that against a team that's just on a completely different level shooting wise. I mean, Miami and Milwaukee are actually very similar in that neither of them were shooting the ball well at all throughout the postseason. So I think Boston was able to get away when they were, the rare occasions where they did leave somebody open, it didn't necessarily burn them. But obviously against Golden State, it's a completely different ball game. And especially if Klay Thompson is going to be shooting the ball the way that he did to end that last series against Dallas. I actually think Klay, if you listen to a lot of podcasts and stuff, there's all this talk about like, man, he just doesn't look like the old Klay. Like Klay's averaging like 20 points a game. He's shooting like 40% from three on a ton of attempts. Like to me, he looks like old Klay. If you want to say defensively, he's slowed down a little bit. That's fine. That's understandable given the injuries. But I mean, I'm not leaving that guy wide open at all. I think he's just as dangerous as ever.
Didn't he just hit 8 3-pointers in game 5?
He did. And he's had like 1 or 2 games where he's looked a little iffy in the playoffs. But I mean, you also have to remember who this guy is. Like ultimately, he's kind of a super role player, right? I mean, it's not like he's a guy who's you're saying like, all right, we're going to put the ball in your hands. You're going to break guys down off the dribble, get to the rack. It's like, he's ultimately just like an insane spot up shooter who fits perfectly with this team. So there are going to be nights when maybe the looks just aren't there. He's doesn't have the ball in his hands constantly. So I think we kind of need to recalibrate where we're at on Klay Thompson. And I think he's going to be a huge factor in this series. So, defensively, I think that's going to be my biggest question for Boston. I think they're going to be able to score. They have enough. I mean, some of the shots that Jason Tatum was hitting throughout that series against Miami, but especially late in game 7 to bail them out when they really needed some baskets. They're going to be all right, I think, scoring the ball, but can they defend Golden State as effectively or even close to as effectively as they have Brooklyn, Milwaukee, and Miami?
Yeah. So I guess my big question for you on that was, you brought up how Milwaukee and Miami's 3-point shooting is nowhere near the level that Golden State is. Was were the Celtics the reason for that? Or is that more just Milwaukee and Miami just not being that good from behind the arc?
Yeah, I against Milwaukee, I'm not going to say that the Bucks were like a fantastic 3-point shooting team. I think they've kind of regressed a decent amount, from where they were even a couple of years ago, where they had guys like Kyle Korver out there it just felt like they had more snipers on the roster. And obviously taking Chris Middleton out of the equation was a big factor as well. But I think you got to tip your cap to the Boston defense. I mean, Milwaukee, even if you factor in that round 1 series against Chicago, I mean, they shot under 33% from 3 for the postseason. I'm trying to bring up their numbers in that Boston series. As a team, Milwaukee shot 28% from 3 against the Celtics. And that's a 7-game sample. If we're talking a 4 or a 5-game series, maybe there's just some fluky games in there like that game 7. But over the course of 7 games, I don't think you just have 7 bad shooting nights in a row. I think that's the pressure that you're facing from the defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of defense, this is the first time since 1996 that the number 1 and number 2 teams in defensive efficiency are meeting in the NBA Finals. So I think we're going to get some of these games. I feel like a lot of people are like, "Oh, got to hammer the over" in a lot of these games here in this series. I think this is going to be a little lower scoring than most of us are thinking here. So let's get to a couple of the props, anyways, that we got here on MKF. We'll start with Jason Tatum. 28.5 points is his more or less, Nick. He's averaging 27 right on the dot this postseason. He's reached 29 or more in 10 of 18 playoff games, though. So how do you feel about Tatum in game 1?
Well, he went just over this number in game 1 against Miami. He went well under in game 1 against Milwaukee, and went just over in game 1 against Brooklyn. So not a lot to take away there. I would imagine that Golden State is going to do everything it can to limit Jason Tatum. I think they'd be happy to say, all right, if we get beat by Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart, in this series, we'll live with that. So I'm inclined to go less here. I think Tatum, has kind of picked up steam. It's felt like as each series has gone along. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's limited a little bit. It's going to be an insane environment in San Francisco. The Warriors are going to come out energized. I like Golden State to win game 1. And if that's going to be the case, there's a pretty decent chance that they do a good job of limiting Tatum.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm right with you on this one. I think Golden State's going to win Thursday night game 1 rather easily. I think they're going to kind of pull away with this one. Game 2, different story. Sunday, if this number's still at 28.5, I would take Jason Tatum to go more on the second one. Then we'll move on to Steph Curry. 27.5 is Steph's number. He's averaging 25.9 points per game in the playoffs. He's reached 28 or more in 8 out of 16 games. So what do you like out of Steph in game 1?
Yeah, Steph is one of the hardest stars, I think, to make picks when it comes to player props, especially for points, because most stars in the league, it's like their team, if they don't show up, their team is not their team's most likely not going to win that game. So like, I like Golden State to win game one, but there is very much a world, much like in game 5 to close out Dallas, where Steph Curry could score 15 points in 35 minutes and they cruise to a victory. We've seen that over and over again with the infrastructure that Golden State has built. All it takes is a big game from Jordan Poole or 8 threes from Klay Thompson, and all of a sudden, Steph Curry isn't needed. Whereas if you think Boston's going to win game one, good luck making that case to me and saying Jason Tatum is going to have like 17 points. It's like that almost, those things almost are 1-to-1. Like if Jason Tatum plays well, Boston can win. Stephen Curry cannot play all that well and Golden State can still win. So that makes it a little more difficult. I think I'll go more here. I don't know. It feels like Steph is playing, like I said earlier, the best basketball that we've seen from him since the first couple months of the season. I think midway through those Memphis and Dallas series, we really started to see kind of the old Stephen Curry. And I think being in the finals, being kind of re-energized will bring back that version of Steph. So I'll go less on Tatum and more on Curry's point prop.
Yeah, I'm going to go less on Steph, just slightly less, though. I think he's going to finish right around like 25, 26. So if this number does come down, I'd hit the more. But I think he's going to have Marcus Smart on him most of the night, and I think it's going to make it kind of difficult for him. So I don't think we're going to see any crazy, like 35-point games from Steph in this series. I think he's just going to be a solid all around, like 25 points per game in this series.
Yeah, so, I can see it going that way. I mean, I don't think Steph is this type of guy, but the finals MVP thing is real, right? I mean, it's not like he's not aware of it. He's going to have to, if the Warriors win the series, it's going to be his award, I think, but he's still got to perform. And I think that's still going to be in the back of his mind. It's like, I don't think we get a huge game out of Steph in game one necessarily, but I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in this series, we see him have one of those games where he's like 9 of 17 from 3.
True. Very true. Yeah, everybody forgets Andre Iguodala won the 2015 NBA Finals MVP award, or 2016, whatever year, the first one.
15, yeah.
Moving on to Jaylen Brown, 23.5 is his more or less on MKF. He's averaging 22.9 this postseason. He's reached 24 or more points in 8 out of 18 games. Your thoughts on Jaylen Brown?
Yeah, another good line by the folks at MKF here. I think I'm inclined to go more here, kind of following the logic of, Golden State is going to do everything it can to limit Tatum. Brown, I think, will have more opportunities because of that. We'll see if he can capitalize. I mean, obviously, it's always hit or miss with Jaylen Brown, but coming off of a pretty strong series, I thought, against Miami, shot almost 50% from the field in that series, shot over 40% from 3 in that series. It's a different ball game, of course, in the NBA Finals, but I like Jaylen Brown to bring it in game one, so I'm going to go more here.
Now, are you going more because Jaylen Brown became the first athlete to sign with Kanye's agency?
Absolutely not. No. And I did see that this morning. Maybe that makes me rethink this a little bit. I just can't imagine how that's a good business decision in the year of our Lord 2022, but more power to him. I saw they got Aaron Donald as well.
Yeah, Aaron Donald's only using him for off the field stuff, not for on the field. So like commercials and that kind of stuff, Aaron Donald's using him for, not for his contract with the Rams. So
I love that though. You had to be like, look, man, like, all right, we need to draw the line here. Like, I don't trust you at all to negotiate an NFL football contract, but off the field, we're good.
Yeah, right. Jaylen Brown, I'm going to go more, just barely, because if I'm going less on Tatum, I feel like I got to go more on Brown. So my Jaylen Brown's my X factor in this series, by the way. And I wish we had a turnover prop on MKF, because the amount of times this dude drives into the lane and just loses the basketball, I think it is more than any player I've watched in the last like 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, well, the crazy thing is, like, his turnover numbers aren't like insane. He had 7 turnovers in, what was it, game 3 against Miami, and then 4 turnovers in games 5, 6, and 7. But it feels like way more, right? It's like he like some of these must be like resulting in jump balls, or he's able to get it back, or he taps it back out to somebody. Like, it feels like he should have like 8 turnovers per game. I'm with you there. Yeah,
he needs to work on his dribbling in the offseason. I think that's his big thing there. And then finally here we got Klay Thompson, 3.5 3-pointers, Nick. He's averaging 3.6 threes per game in the playoffs. So right there at that number. Nick's already signaling more. He's reached 4 or more, though, Nick, in just 6 out of 16 games, and only once in the Western Conference Finals. So you like him to break that trend?
I do. Klay's always been a big game guy. I think he's probably the number one player on this team who is elated to be back in the NBA Finals with a chance to kind of fully reassert himself, as a future Hall of Famer, as, one of the most reliable, most dangerous shooters of all time. And, for Klay Thompson, asking him to hit 4 threes in an NBA Finals game, that's not too much to ask. I know he had a few games where he was quiet against Dallas. I think he had only 2 total made threes through the first two games of that series, but I love the way that he heated up. I think it was game 3. He hit 3 threes at 8, of course, in game 5, had an 8 3-pointer game against Memphis. Unfortunately, when we're talking props, like hitting 4 threes is the same as hitting 8. So it has been kind of feast or famine with him. Those big explosions are carrying that average when you're talking made threes per game. But I think we get a good Clay game here. I think we get a lot of attempts. I think the Warriors, are going to do a good job of moving the ball and generating good looks.
Yeah, I'm going to go more just because I feel like watching a full NBA game, expecting and hoping Klay Thompson to have 3 or less threes is just going to be a miserable experience. So I'm going to go more on that one just for that reason alone. Any other props that you like in this series or for game 1?
No, I mean, if you're looking at the line, it's what, Golden State -3.5. I think that seems about right. I would definitely take the Warriors right now, but I don't know. There's been a lot of things happening in these playoffs that just kind of defy conventional logic, or at least defy my logic. Like every time I thought Boston was about to take control of the series against Milwaukee or the series against Miami, it felt like they would lose the next game. And then when you thought that the opponent was going to take control, Boston would rally back. And it's been a really unpredictable playoff so far. So it would be surprising certainly if Boston comes out and wins game 1 by 10 points, but I think I'd be lying if I said I would be shocked. I mean, we know this is a very good team.
Yeah. My other prop I like here, I really like actually a lot, is Al Horford more than 8.5 rebounds in game 1 that we have here on MKF. Excuse me. He's averaging 9.6 per game throughout the postseason. He's had 9 or more in 10 of 17 games. And Al doesn't have to. Al has stuffed the score sheet in a way where it's like he'll have 3 points with 14 boards. Mm-hmm. It's like no problem there. So I really like that one a lot on MKF.
I think I would go the opposite on Kevon Looney's rebound prop, which sits at 9.5 for game 1. I know he was fantastic against Dallas. I think he's going to continue to play a role in this series, but there have been times in the past, both in the playoffs and in the regular season, where they just go away from him. They like going with the smaller lineups against certain teams. Obviously, he doesn't move as well on the perimeter. And I think that line is boosted a little bit by him having that 18 rebound game against Dallas and then that 22 rebound game earlier against Memphis. So that one to me is a little bit high for a guy whose role does have a tendency to fluctuate. I mean, he wasn't even starting for most of that Memphis series. So just something to keep in mind when it comes to Looney. I would go less on 9.5 for game 1.
All right, very good. Okay, prediction time, Nick. Who is winning the Larry O'Brien trophy?
That's the NBA Finals trophy, I believe. Yes, I'm going to go Golden State. I wish I could say it with more conviction in my voice, but I think we have to go with the Warriors. Like I said, it feels like Boston has flown a little too close to the sun a few times during these playoffs and gotten away with it. But I think Golden State is the team that finally makes the pay. And honestly, having these first 2 games on the road for Boston, that's big. I know they haven't had like the biggest home court advantage in these playoffs, like great crowds, but they haven't played all that well at home.
No, they've actually been terrible at home.
yeah, but they had that game. It was one of the Miami games, whichever one where they were down like 45-15 or something. And I remember watching that game, like, this game is clearly over, and the crowd was acting like it was a 1-point game. Like the crowd never once believed that one was over. So they've had great crowds, but yeah, they've been terrible at home. I think things could get away from Boston real quickly. Like everybody's expecting him to lose game 1. If that happens, and then you lose game 2. It's like, can this team climb out of an 0-2 hole against the Golden State Warriors? I don't know, but we're getting way ahead of ourselves. Who knows? Maybe they'll be up 2-0 for all we know.
Yeah, I'm glad you finally got to experience a little bit of what is the Green Teamer and the Celtic fan experience, because everything is sunshine and positive in Green Teamer land. There are no negatives, no bad days when you're a Celtics fan, even though it's been almost 15 years since your last title and you've just won in the last 30 something years. So I'm going to go with that being said, I'm taking Celtics in 7, just to validate my 16-year-old self. Nick, you'll like this. In 2009, I made my high school desktop background. It's all about banner number 18 with Paul Pierce standing underneath that. Didn't end up playing out. They lost in 2009 to the Magic in the conference finals. And then the next year I changed it to Kevin Garnett with the same thing. It's all about banner number 18. They lost to the Lakers in the finals that year. So then I just stopped putting Celtics background.
Changed it to Jay Crowder.
Yeah. We eventually got there. I think I threw up like a Jason Terry one year.
Oh, wow.
But anyways, I stopped putting Celtics backgrounds on my desktop. So I'm hoping that finally can validate and finally get banner 18. So I'm going Celtics 7.
All right. Well, one, I'll say Paul Pierce is probably my least favorite professional athlete of all time. So I'm just going to get that out there. Absolutely hated him his entire career. Just a brutal basketball player to watch and follow. Separately, so are you you're picking the Celtics to win, but I get the sense that, you realize that the Warriors are going to be obviously a very difficult opponent. Like,
Oh yeah.
if the Warriors win the series, like what will be your level of disappointment as a Celtics fan? Like, is there any element of really happy that this team made it this far? They'll have more runs in them, or is it like we need to win this?
I think this is just the beginning for them. I think this group, they seem pretty committed, and I think if they can add one more piece, especially if I think they have a max slot opening up too this summer. So if they can bring someone in, I think they're going to be good for a while. They're going to be right there knocking at the door. But no, I won't be disappointed if they get swept, like, or they lose in 5. I'm going to be shocked. But
no, I would be shocked too.
They've been so good and so resilient, and like since New Year's Day, they've just been far and away the best team in the Eastern Conference. And I expect this to go 7 games one way or another, but I'm going to take Celtics in 7 just because they've been so good with their backs against the wall all year.
Yeah. I mean, talent wise, these teams stack up, I think, really evenly. I know a lot of the analytics, as they have all season, love Boston in this series. I saw some graphic. I don't know if it was like ESPN or 538 or something, said that Boston has like an 86% chance to win the series.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe some things are pointing toward Golden State, others are pointing toward Boston. But it's gonna be a really good one.
538 has been all over the Celtics since like late January. They had them. I think around like Valentine's Day, right after the Super Bowl, they had the Celtics had like the 38% chance to win the title. So they've been all over them. And Nate Silver's company there has just been all over the Celtics. So we'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm hoping we're going to get to do another show here as this series goes on. So hopefully we'll get to talk to you guys. Nick, thank you very much. And thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and good luck on all your contests.